When you're changing money while traveling, you like to know the exchange rate. In most of my trips to India, it took about $2 to get a 100 rupee bill. Or I could state it as, I can get 50 rupees for $1. With similar math, you can find out what a rupee is worth. A dollar is 100 cents or 50 rupees, therefore a rupee is worth 2 cents. Your high school algebra teacher tried to make this simple by giving short names to the variables. The dollar-rupee story would have looked like this in algebra. They always seemed to want to know what x was worth. You were supposed to get x down to one value and make both sides of the equation match. So if 2x is worth 100, 1x is worth 50. Now let's use a different example where $5 is worth 10 lev. But the algebra teacher is going to give you this. 5x equals 10. Well, that means each x is worth 2. Well, what would a lev be worth? Well, then a lev is worth half a dollar, or 1 is equal to half of x. Now, we don't want to do this work ourselves. We just want to understand what we're asking C# to do for us. When we got our dog Barkley, we proudly told our friends and family that we have a new addition to the family. Before, there were 2 of us plus the 2 kids, so our fam num is 4. With Barkley, we had to increment the family number by a count of 1. In other words, whatever the size of the family was before, when a new member arrives, you increment the family size by 1. Let's write a few lines of C# code to illustrate this. The first right line will say 4. And this next right line after the increment will say 5. Instead of trying to use the family num variable on both sides of the equation at once, the compiler breaks this down into 2 very specific steps. The first step is what is listed to the right of the equal sign, which is to take the value and add 1 to it. Once that calculation is done and the result is stored in memory, then it looks to the left of the equal sign to see what it needs to do with the result of the calculation. That single equal sign assignment tells it to take this value that is now in memory and put it into the fam num variable, where it overrides the current value of 4 with a new value of 5. Now this particular line is so common that programmers have come up with a great shorthand for it. This line here does the exact same thing. Family num plus plus. This notation is known as a unary operator, since there is only one value associated with the operation. Okay, let's start this section by opening up Visual Studio Express for 2012, and we will start a new project. Let's make sure that we're in Visual C# and we're doing a console application, and it's in the C Drive's Joes to Pros folder. This time, we're going to name it CH4A for Chapter 4A. And we'll click OK, and there's our starter code. Okay, let's start by writing some code. We will start by declaring a variable, and we'll have that be an integer. And we'll call it mynum, and we'll set that equal to 5. Next, let's set up a console writeline. So we'll type console.writeline, and then in the parentheses we will type mynum, which is the variable we just declared and set to 5. Okay, let's write one more line of code. Let's say that mynum is equal to mynum plus 1. Now, we want to see what that looks like. And now we'll print that using a console writeline, and then we will put the mynum variable inside the writeline. And just to slow the program down at the very end, let's put a console.readline. Let's run and test this code. Let's see what we get. And there we go. The first thing we did was ask it to print mynum, which was set to 5, and then after the incrementer, we printed mynum, which is 6. That was after we incremented. Now, there's an easier way to do this than using this binary operator. We can delete this line, and let's change it to a unary operator by typing mynum plus plus. And be sure to end it with a semicolon. Now, what this is saying is take my num, which is 5, and then increment it up by 1. Now this is ready to be tested. Okay, let's click Start. And there we go. The same results, 5 and 6. Okay, let's move the plus plus to the left side of the operator. And let's run that. You can put the plus plus before or after the variable. In both cases, it adds a 1 to the value. So let's delete all this code in our project and let's look at an example that will explain the difference between the plus plus before and the plus plus after the variable name. All right, to do this, we're going to type some new code. Let's go to the first line and let's declare a couple of variables. The first one will be int of num1, which is equal to 4, and we'll set up another int of num2, which is also equal to 4, and then a third one will be an integer, num3, and that is also equal to a value of 4. Now, we're going to set up a console write line to see these values. In quotations, we'll put in the variable placeholders 0, 1, 2, so it's the first, second, and third placeholder, and num1 plus plus will go in the first placeholder, num2 will go in the second variable placeholder, and plus plus num3 will go in the third variable placeholder. And now we'll add a console read line at the end just to slow it down so we can see the results. Let's take a few seconds to look at the expected output. If you were thinking it should be 5, 4, 5, that would be a wrong answer. The difference between having the plus plus before or after the variable has to do with when the value gets increased in relationship to when we see the values. In our example, the variable num1 starts off as containing a value of 4. When it gets the num1 plus plus, the compiler notices the plus signs are after the variable name. So it first writes the value of the variable, which is 4, to the variable placeholder, and then it increases its value by 1 to 5. When we get to the next variable, it's unaffected. But the last one has the plus plus num3, and the plus plus is before the variable name. So this time, it will increment num3 before sending the value to the write line to be printed out. So let's run this and see if it returns what we predicted. 4, 4, 5. What about adding more than 1 to a value? For that, you can't just add a bunch more plus signs. That would cause the compiler to get very confused. Since it is not a defined operation, this won't work. Instead, you have to type an equation, or an expression. So let's say we wanted to add 5 to num2. You would have to add a new line of code and say num2 equals num2 plus 5. And then let's call on it with a console write line. And in quotations, we're going to put after the increment, and then we'll put is, and then the 0 placeholder. And we'll place num2 as the variable to feed the variable placeholder. Let's run this. And there you see, we get 4, 4, 5 from our first write line, and then it says after increment is 9 on the second write line. We took 4 and we incremented it by 5. You can do this with other math operators. Here are the binary operators for subtracting, multiplying, and dividing from page 71 of the C# book. That will do it for Chapter 4.1 on binary operators. Our next item, Chapter 4.2. Let C# do the math.